Badenoch's tenure as Conservative leader has been, at best, an exercise in inertia and at worst a slow-motion car crash in the making. And what she did yesterday was simply reinforce the sense that she lacks the capacity, the coherence, the political acumen, or even the basic communication skills to lead her party effectively. If I'd said to lead the Conservatives, I would have had a string of C's. The fundamental issue with Badenoch is that she has failed to set out any clear vision of what the Conservative Party could be post-electoral collapse, because she's waiting for the next general election. Well, wake up, because there's still another few years. There's still four or 5 years to go before that event. And in that time, she's actually got to do something. She's got to pull her finger out and start doing some work. She inherited a party in disarray, hemorrhaging voters to both Labour and Reform UK after the worst political result, after the worst electoral result that the Conservative Party has ever had. And her response has been a peculiar mixture of inaction and incoherence. And instead of outlining a bold alternative to Labour, she has adopted a peculiar blend of reactionary soundbites, Farage-light rhetoric, and defence posturing, without offering any meaningful policy framework, without offering any meaningful leadership. I mean, to say that she is hopeless would be to undermine the reputation of Liz Truss or Nadine Dorries. And Nadine Dorries isn't particularly helpless or hopeless. She strings together a very good novel, certainly a page-turner, even when she writes political rubbish like The Plot. It's readable. Kemi Badenoch, when she starts speaking, you literally want to switch the wireless off. You literally want to silence her. It is extraordinary. I feel embarrassed, even to be saying this. I feel like a former Doctor Who. In fact, I'm almost dressed like a Doctor Who when I'm talking about silencing Kemi Badenoch. I simply want to switch her off because I am so bored by Badenoch. It's going to be a disaster. Well, actually, it's not. The disaster is of her own making. The disaster is her incoherence. And what we expect from any leader of a political party in the UK or in any country is competence, and Kemi Badenoch hasn't got any. Her PMQs performance this week was yet another example of her inability to do her job, to land a decisive blow against Keir Starmer. And Starmer was able to bat one straight at her, and she ends up with egg on her face. She continues to flounder at the dispatch box, often making points that are either factually incorrect, poorly framed, or self-defeating. At one point, she bizarrely claimed that Labour's policies were stolen from the Conservatives, an argument so lacking in self-awareness that Starmer should simply have responded with the deadpan, "Thank you for your support." Moreover, she tried to attack the Employment Rights Bill by claiming that it was an adventure playground for lawyers, suggesting that workers could start a job in the morning and file a tribunal case in the afternoon. This was an absurd assertion, easily dismantled by Starmer, who noted that anyone, even with a passing familiarity with employment law, knows that's not how it works. The coup de grace came when he likened her to a lettuce, recalling Liz Truss's ignominious fate to be forever branded as something in a vegetable patch, which, while not the most sophisticated of jibes, resonated because Badenoch increasingly looks like a leader on borrowed time. If not a lettuce, then certainly a carrot or a cabbage. Certainly something that, if there were room in the Smeg fridge, we would probably put in the fridge, but there isn't room in the Smeg fridge because it's filled with Putin. One of the greatest ironies of Badenoch's leadership is that despite her apparent desire to drag, that's not RuPaul, to drag the Tories to the right, she's consistently been outflanked by Nigel Farage. Oh, I'm not shallow. And whether it's the farmers' protests, immigration, or attacks on Labour's economic policies, Farage is the one dominating the headlines. Oh, I'm not shallow. While Badenoch remains either absent or ineffectual, just saying, Brace! Brace! It's going to be a disaster! Its Reform UK continues to pull dangerously close to the Conservatives and in some instances outpace them, ahead of them. It's a direct consequence, not of the Reform UK's brilliance, but of the Conservatives' failure led by this ineffective, inconsequential, incompetent individual. It's a direct consequence of Badenoch's failure to provide a compelling reason for disaffected right-wing voters to stay loyal to the Conservatives. Her approach seems to mimic Farage's populist messaging without understanding the craft that goes with it. When Farage talks about immigration, he couches it in a nationalist rhetoric that appeals to his base. Badenoch, on the other hand, strays into bizarre pseudo-eugenicist territory, talking about peasants forming subcommittees, which not only sounds archaic, but also alienates great swaths of potential Conservative voters. Even among Tory MPs, the whispers of discontent are growing louder than King Midas's whispers. Who's got ass's ears here? It's not an ass's ears which we're worried about, it's the entire ass. The Conservative Party is being led by an ass. It is literally asinine. The Conservative Party has a long history of executing leaders who fail to deliver results. Now it's expecting people listening to Radio 4 to mute them. Badenoch is increasingly on thin ice. Her January the 16th speech was supposed to be a reset moment where she could reassert leadership and lay out a coherent vision. Instead, it was meandering in some list of grievances, most of which could easily have come from a Labour manifesto. Complaints about business regulation, energy supply, low productivity and immigration, without offering any tangible solutions, only reinforcing the perception that she's all rhetoric, no substance. All fur coat and no knickers. The most damning aspect of her leadership is that she is postponing any actual policy announcements until 2027, apparently assuming that the next election won't be until 2029. Brace! Brace! This level of complacency is extraordinary, especially for a party already at risk of being leapfrogged by Reform UK. As William Hague says, the Conservative Party is an absolute monarchy regulated by a regicide. If Badenoch doesn't improve her polling soon, she will find herself on the receiving end of Tory ruthlessness. The problem is I don't think there's any replacement waiting in the ranks. There's no rankers there who can replace this abject, self-obsessed, self-pitying individual. The rankers in the Conservative Party should be lining up to prepare themselves to outrank Kemi Badenoch, but nobody is. Nobody is. Kemi Badenoch's leadership has so far been an exercise in wasted opportunity, but that's because she's filling a void. And the void is the Conservative Party itself. She lacks any coherent vision. So do they. She lacks a coherent policy platform because they've removed it. She lacks any basic political instincts because they elected her. At PMQs, she continues to flail ineffectively, like a spider pinned to a board, allowing Starmer to ridicule her with ease. Meanwhile, Farage and Reform UK are steadily eroding the Tories' right-wing base. Unless she rapidly shifts gears and moves back into the centre and picks up the Conservative Party that's drifted off into the electoral wilderness, because not all of them gone off to the Lib Dems. Some of them, like me, simply shrug and say, well, what are we to do? We are now partyless. Unless she rapidly shifts gears and provides a compelling reason for a Conservative Party to exist at all in this post-Brexit world, post-Johnson era, she may not even make it to the next general election as leader, and nor will the Conservative Party make it to the next general election as a coherent, competent party. I mentioned post-Johnson, but there's only one Johnson in my mind, and well, actually, there's quite a lot, and the Conservative Party is busy playing with them, and it's doing itself no good. It's a self-indulgent, congratulatory orgy of self-abuse, and it doesn't deserve to be taken seriously. It deserves to be ridiculed. And if it's elected Kemi Badenoch as its leader, maybe it's done. Maybe it's put itself in the history books as a reality. Kemi Badenoch is indeed the epitome, the apotheosis of all the Conservative Party can offer at the moment. It's a disaster! It really is.